Hi, I'm Patrick Convery. This is Joe Mullings, and you are watching The Dirty Dozen. Joe, I'm going to backtrack on something that I used to teach the network, and I learned this from you and was inspired by you. And I used to tell them, you need to look at your audience, and you need to align your brand with your audience. And I'm going backwards on that because it's more important that you deliver the content and the information that they need. But I want to talk about your brand identity, crafting your own voice, because I think it's so important that you deliver that information that your audience needs in only a way that you can do it, and that's by being yourself. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because there's only one Joe Mullings out there, and people see you. And Joe, let's be honest, they see the tattoos peeking out of the shirts, you know, the language every now and then, and some people, they can't get past that. And my advice to them is get over it. It's Joe, and let his work speak for itself. But at what point did you get comfortable enough just being yourself, going out there and kind of saying, if they like me, they like me, and if not, too bad?
Well, it's never too bad, right? You know, you never want to quite Dennis Rodman it to an extent, although Dennis wanted to be loved by everybody like we all do. You know, it's important that whatever you pick you're going to be is sustainable. And it's always sustainable to be yourself. Yep. The guidance I give to people is, who are you going to be when I wake you up at 2 o'clock in the morning? Make sure that's the person you are in social. Because what's going to happen is the world we're moving into is the camera's going to be on. And whether you see me on Untitled Unfiltered, True Future, in the MRINetwork, wherever that is, I want you to, or you know, I'm in Forbes, I'm in Business Insider. When you're reading that article, I want you to hear my voice. Yep. And I want you to be like, yeah, he wrote that article. And so it's important that you are who you are. And you know, to borrow from a very bright man, Simon Sinek, is wear the red hat, and the people in the red hats will find you.
Explain the red hat, because I quoted you on that and I pushed it out. And of course, in 2020, there's the chance of that becoming political with red hats floating around. What does red hat mean?
I'm lost on that one. So I don't know what red hats mean, right? So what red hats mean is Simon Sinek in, it wasn't Why, it was the follow-up to Why. He talks about great brands. And if you want to read about branding, pick up anything Sinek by Simon Sinek. Yeah. And Simon talks about branding and the importance of being truthful to who you are, not trying to advertise against your competitors, not trying to counter what's going on in the marketplace, just be who you are. And and you're going to have a red hat on. That's who your identity is. So we can take away red hats so we can stay political and so say, be who you are, and those who want to follow you are going to follow you. And that's critical, because if you're trying to be somebody else, it's not sustainable. If you're trying to be somebody else, we've all been in relationships that we've sacrificed who we are, and it's come at the expense of mental and physical health. So if you're going to move your career in the direction of creating a brand, no matter what you think, be who you are, because then it's sustainable, and then it will never come at the expense of your mental or physical health, and that should trump everything.
And that applies to your company brand as well. So a lot of people, it's easy to write in your own voice. You're Joe, I'm Pat. I'm always myself when I create content on LinkedIn. I hope you hear my Philly accent in your head while you're reading it, right? With a company, I want you to ask yourself, when you create content for your company, can you describe your company as a human being? And the content that you just created, does that person you describe come through?
The company is a little more difficult because the company usually is a chorus of voices. So the chorus of voices, and I can only speak from our perspective, you know, I've got 25 years, 19 years, 9 years, you know, people who are iconic in my organizations, they need to be allowed to be their voice. And they all map to the North Star that represents the Mullings Group companies. And so while what we believe in is intention, competitiveness, equality of opportunity, performance, outcomes, relentlessness. I think all those people demonstrate those in their own ways. And I can't say, be relentless right now. I can't say, show me outcomes right now. And I think you have to look at it as over a body of work longitudinally to decide. And that's a point is, don't try and make every piece of your content prove a point every time. What you want to do is longitudinally look at your body of work as any artist. View yourself as an artist, especially if you're going to live out loud in the public domain. And longitudinally be concerned with what your brand is versus on each specific transaction.
But do you think that chorus of voices comes together to form one overall brand?
If I did a good job of hiring the team and assembling the team and making sure that those who have agreed to put content out in the public domain, we've had some opportunities early in our social initiatives where somebody put something out that I don't think they realized that it could have been interpreted in a certain way that was almost 90 degrees from who we stood for. That wasn't their intention, just as a lot of emails we send out. Yeah. Our emails are not intentional, but when you read them and somebody says, it could have been read this way, and somebody's like, oh my gosh, I never even saw that, you have to think about that. So, when you look at a company brand, it needs to be a chorus of voices all aligning to whatever your North Star is and your message is. And my TMG message as a North Star could be entirely different than another very successful firm.
Yeah, yeah. I want to go back to the personal branding because it's so important to be yourself. And there's only one you, and it's not that hard. You don't have to put any effort into being yourself, which is great. But the reason that's so important, I like to put content out that's relatable to my audience, right, Joe? And I'm a millennial. And I grew up youngest of 4 boys, and we all played sports, and we loved professional wrestling growing up. And think about the personalities that I grew up watching. Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Macho Man Randy Savage, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Undertaker.
See, I was back in Bruno Sammartino, Specially Delivery Jones. I mean,
Superfly, were you Superfly
Jimmy
generation?
Snuka, yeah, sorry. That was back in my time, but I hear you. Go ahead.
So I go back to the Royal Rumble, where every minute, every 2 minutes, another wrestler would run down and jump in. And as children, we would sit around and wait for the next big name. And our favorite wrestlers had unique characters, unique personalities. Now, we all know that's not who they really are at home. So it's not a great example of being authentic. But hear me out here. When we sat around in the living room waiting for the next wrestler to come out, I don't know how many wrestlers come out in the Royal Rumble, but let's say there's 30 of them. Maybe 15 were wrestlers we cared about, and then there were these nobodies who were just fillers. There are a lot of fillers on LinkedIn right now. So think about that. You're running into the Royal Rumble. Are people going to know who you are when you walk or run down that ramp and jump into the ring? Are they going to care about who you are? Are they going to get excited? And if the answer is no, how are you going to craft a voice and how are you going to push out content that gets their attention and makes them excited next time you hit that post button?
Well, look, the interesting advantage each person in the MRINetwork has is they probably are an expert in career development in their dig. They probably have had more conversations about managing careers. They've had probably more conversations about how to create value in front of the customer. They've probably had more conversations about how to create value by the company back to the candidate pool. That's the first place I would start. There's really no stretch there. And so you've got an expertise in those areas. Why don't you stay in your swim lane for now in that area? You don't have to come up with, every day you shouldn't have to think about what you're going to post if you're just getting started. You should really keep a Post-it pad next to you. We've talked about this before. And just jot down interesting conversations that you had, and that will be your fodder for your post. So you running down the aisleway to the cage or the ring, the ring is careers and companies. You're an expert in that area. And then just keep your style in that area, and you will start to get followers and eventually fanatics.
Yep, and we'll dive into that later down the road in the Dirty Dozen. Okay, this has been the Dirty Dozen, and remember, it's important to craft your own voice. Get working.